Welcome to this workshop on survey development and implementation. We are very thrilled as the Research and Publications Office at IIM Ahmedabad. Last year, we started a series of workshops purely focused on methods. And these methods are meant to be used in researchers and also in doctoral dissertations as well as publications. So we have done several workshops previously, and we continue to do that this year as well, and hopefully going forward. Today, we are very thrilled to have with us Dr. Devasmita Chakraverty. This is the second workshop she has been doing with the RNP office. To give a bit of background about her work and what she studies. So she's currently an assistant professor at Indian Institute of Management Ahmedabad, where we are located. And she teaches survey design to both MBA as well as PhD students. She routinely uses surveys for her research as well, and hence we have the best person to take this workshop as well. Her broad research focuses on why people in STEM and medicine experience the imposter's phenomenon. And what is interesting when I read her resume is also she has a wide variety of experience across different streams of education, whether it is sciences, whether it's chemistry or medicine, or even talking about public health. So I think she understands, and she also has been in the shoes of different researchers from different organizations, and that makes us also the apt facilitator for today's workshop. So without much delay, I would give the Zoom to her, and I hope all of you, have some key takeaways from these workshops, and you're able to make your research career even stronger. And the inputs from this talk or workshop are helpful for you to pursue your career. So thank you, Devasmita.
Thank you, Devjit, for this introduction and for the platform. And thank you to the Research and Publications Office for organizing everything. I hope I'm audible to everyone, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a lot of content to cover in 2 hours. Devjit already gave a little bit of background. I teach both MBA courses and PhD level courses on survey development. Really what I have done here today is I have compiled and I have condensed everything that I have learned over a period of 2 hours. So if you have any questions, and I always welcome questions, but for the sake of time, just hold on to your questions and write it down on a piece of paper. It's possible that your question will be answered as I am presenting. If not, we will have about 15 minutes or 20 minutes at the end of the presentation, where I'll be happy to take any questions. So let's get started. I wanted to start with a question. And my question is, on a scale of 1 to 5, how excited are you to learn about surveys? Please write your answers in the chat window. And if someone from the RNP office could tell me what kind of answers have people written? How excited are you to learn about surveys?
A quick response, most are 5 and a few 4s, but I see some are also 8. So it goes beyond the 5 scale.
Okay. All right, but mostly 5.
Mostly 5, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So look back to 30 seconds earlier when I asked you the question. How excited are you to learn about surveys? Are you making some assumptions when you write it's a 5 or a 4 or a 8 or a 0 or a 1? What kind of assumptions are you making? I want you to think about that. And that's what I'll be doing for the entire 2 hours. I'll be sensitizing you to certain assumptions you make when you fill out surveys as a survey taker. And as a survey maker, how do we know what assumptions people might be making for which they give certain kinds of answers? Now, let me take a guess. You assume that 5 is either most excited or not at all excited, right? It's not written here. right? You just assumed that since it's 1 to 5, and I'm hoping by 5 you assume that you are the most excited, otherwise you won't be here. You assume that there's a correlation between the number, the value of the number, and the level of excitement you have. So if it's 1, then you are least excited. But if it's 5, then you are most excited, right? And that's not true, because I haven't told you what 1 means, what 2 means, what 3 means, what 4 means, and what 5 means. You also possibly assumed that the 5 points are equidistant. So your level of excitement is kind of correlated with the number you choose. So this is what I want you to think about. Now let's look at another slide. And this is a newspaper clipping. Question of the day: what should cost less, a gallon of gas or a gallon of milk? Now, maybe one person could tell me, what do they think about this question? Yeah, I mean, just say it. Neha?
Yes, it seemed like a double barrel question where you don't know what it's pertaining to, whether you're talking about gallon of gas, yes or no, or gallon of milk, yes or no.
Right, exactly. So the question stem does not match the answer choices. And that is what makes it difficult to fill out a survey. Okay, all right. So what we'll do, since there are so many of us, I mean, I already see 93 participants. And if this was an in-person workshop with fewer people, I'll be doing it slightly differently. But for the sake of standardization, let us assume that all of us at this point belong to an institution, an organization called the Indian Institute of Survey Management. It's a fictitious organization, but for the next 2 hours, this is where we belong. And you're welcome to choose your avatar, what you want to be in that institution. So you could be a faculty at IISM. You could be a researcher. You could be a PhD student. You could be a postgrad or an undergrad student. You could be a consultant. You could be a statistician, or you could be anyone else who works at that institute or lives there. Okay, are we clear on this? So take a few seconds and make up your mind about who you are at the Indian Institute of Survey Management. I'll probably choose to be a faculty in one of the survey departments, which makes sense, right? So now we'll take a look at what's going on at the Indian Institute of Survey Management. All good so far? Okay. Sorry. My clicker is not working, so just give me a second to figure this out. Just give me a second. ये काम नहीं कर, ये भी काम कर. ठीक है? Okay. Okay. Now, this is an email that we get on a very regular basis. I mean, it depends. You tell me that the subject line says, need 2 minutes of your time. And then, hi, everyone. Please help us with a small survey for our group project. It will take just 2 minutes of your time, but will be a great help for us. How many of you have read such emails? You've actually received such emails. Too bad I can't see all of you on the screen, but how many of us also write such emails? Very short, non-specific emails. Now, do these emails work? Do you think, what do you think? Do people really get the kind of responses, the survey responses that they want? Maybe someone can tell me what's problematic with this email?
It sounds too needy.
It sounds too needy. Yeah. And
It doesn't sound credible.
it doesn't sound credible.
Yeah.
It's not specific, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not.
Nothing is mentioned what exactly the researcher is looking for. So
Right.
anybody
So
will be skeptical in opening this and filling it out.
So would you open such a survey and fill it out?
I
Possibly.
don't know if I'm the target audience for this. Do they want only housewives? Do they want only students or IT employees to answer? So I would probably not click on it thinking it's so generic.
And do you think it's the participants' onus to find out if the survey is for them or not?
No.
Is it their responsibility, or is it my responsibility as a survey maker to be specific?
The researcher should be specific.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll take a look at more problematic messages. And there's a reason that we are looking at a few problematic messages to sensitize ourselves to these kind of messages and what can be done about them. So hi, can you give me 2 minutes of your time for something very important? Think of how many times you have received a request like this. What were these surveys about? Did you even click on them? Who created them? These are questions I want you to think about. Why did they choose you? They haven't written anything. Do you fill out those surveys? Why or why not? And how many times have you sent out needy messages like this? There's but many fundamental questions that I want you to think about. Think about maybe 2 examples from your life where you have used survey data to make a decision. Maybe I'll give you 30 seconds to think about it. And maybe if 2 people want to go ahead and tell us. And if you're writing on chat, then I would request someone to read it out because I'm not able to see my chat simultaneously.
Someone's written students' feedback after course while writing research papers.
Okay. Student feedback after the course. So what do you use that feedback for?
Maybe to improve the delivery of the course at the next occasion.
Yeah. So faculty evaluation, right?
Yes.
Good. Anything else? Any other interesting example?
Post-training feedback.
Post-training feedback. So what decision did you make?
How to better the infrastructure, or if we have recently moved to hybrid mode of training, so then how to better it, like was the time factor not relevant, like for those kind of decisions, was the speaker very clear, this kind of feedback post-training.
Okay. And if you could list 2 surveys, you don't have to talk about it here, but any 2 surveys that you are familiar with. Typically, what's one survey that everyone has heard about? Any guesses?
I guess about the census.
The census, right? So what's the difference between the census and any other survey?
Census has the whole population.
Exactly. The census will survey everyone in a population, but that's not possible every time because there are certain limitations. There are restrictions on time and money and energy and human power, which is why it's not possible to survey everyone. Okay. Now, you also need to think about if surveying is always a good approach. Why or why not? Are there other ways of collecting data? What are those ways? And do you need to survey everyone unless you are doing a census? Or who should you select? How should you select? What are the basic resources you have for survey implementation? And this is what you should be thinking either at the organization level or at the group level or whatever level you work. What are the basic resources? Like a textbook about survey could also be a resource, or a recording of this workshop is also a resource, a knowledge resource. But other than that, you need time, you need money, you need people willing to work with you. So it takes a lot of resources. Do you always fill out surveys diligently? How many times have you deleted a survey request or did not fill it up carefully, and why? And how many survey modes do you know about? We'll also talk about the different survey modes. Most of us by survey these days understand online surveys, but there are different modes. And also, if you had to create a survey, what do you anticipate will be some of your challenges? Since all of you are here, so many of you, I hope that you are interested in creating a survey of your own. And if you had to do, please think about what would be your challenges. Maybe you do not know, this is the first time you're doing it and you do not know what questions to ask. It's possible that the population that you're looking at is very hard to reach, and you might have challenges reaching out to your population. So there are so many challenges that you could be facing. It's important that you take note of that and write it down. Okay. Now, we've talked of other methods of data collection. You may be familiar with many of these: interviews, you can do focus group discussion, participant observation, you can do content analysis, experiments, you can analyze administrative records of online searches, social media, sales transaction, and so many more. So you also need to ask yourself, is surveying really the best method available to you to answer the questions that you want to answer? Sometimes people say, yeah, survey is easy to do, you quickly get data. That should not be the motivation to do a survey. You should really think carefully. Okay. Now, an email that never got a reply. What's that email? And I'll read it aloud. Hi, Prof. Very good survey workshop. I want to discuss a great survey idea with you. Could we meet sometime early next week, preferably on Monday, anytime between 2 to 4 p.m.? I am busy in the morning and will be traveling to Kolkata after that. Ciao. Sarvesh Dotto. I've made up this email, parts of this email. It's slightly exaggerated, but I do get email that has similar content. So I'm not at all surprised when I get an email like this. What do you think? Why did Sarvesh Dotto not get a reply? What's problematic with the email?
The communication language is very informal, and here it seems like the need is his to discuss the idea with a more knowledgeable person, that is a professor, but he is making it sound like meet me at this time slot as if it's your work that he is completing, you know.
Right. What else?
Also, the objective of the study has not been mentioned. So it's a very open-ended mail, talking about everything and anything, but about the specific topic or about the specific thing that we want to discuss with the professor or anyone whom we are contacting. So I guess a proper email should have that a little bit context, what's the study is all about, and then, maybe it will be mutually beneficial for both the parties, for the surveyor as well as, for the professor, to understand whether it's going to be a fruitful conversation or not. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else that's problematic in this email?
Also, there's no affiliation about the author who's written it, like from where, which organization.
There are some spelling mistake in the email. He has not mentioned properly formulated the word. It's just like he's just sending a text message to someone.
Yeah.
Whom he knows very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an official communication. So it's not surprising that I never replied to Sarvesh Dotto. Now, why am I showing you this email? Because we will understand something that's called the social exchange theory. And the social exchange theory applies in all social situations where two or more people interact. But it's especially relevant and how we'll talk about in respect to developing surveys, implementing surveys, and writing surveys. There are three components to social exchange, any kind of social exchange. And you should write down those three components. The first one is cost. The second one is benefit. And the third one is trust. I'll repeat it. Number one is cost. Number two is benefit. And number three is trust. Now, in any social interaction, you are more likely to get a favorable outcome. I'm not saying you will get a favorable outcome, but you're more likely to get one when you have decreased the cost, increased the benefit, and improved the trust. For whom? Not for you, but for the other person. I'll repeat that. You're more likely to get a favorable social exchange when you have decreased my cost, increased my benefit, and improved my trust. And this is the framework that we will use for the rest of the workshop to look at surveys. Now, I have a huge cost if I reply to this email. First of all, it's going to cost me time. I have no idea what this person wants from me. And there's absolutely no benefit for me. Benefit is not always monetary benefit. It could be anything. But I don't see any benefit in answering to this email. And there's no trust. I don't know who this person is. Just a person among 200 people who have attended this workshop and is writing to me as if, he's some big figure. And naturally, I'm going to ignore this email. So this is what I just told you, that there is no trust, there is no benefit, and there's a huge cost to me, right? And we've already talked about some of these things. Writing is not clear, it's not persuasive. I have no interest when I read this email. There's no personalized way of greeting. Hi, Prof. The person hasn't even looked up my name, most likely. Sarvesh's busy schedule is not my problem. His trip to Kolkata is not my problem. So he's cluttering up the email with unnecessary information for me. He hasn't told me how much time he's going to need, which I need to make a decision. And it's good if he would have sent me something that he's thinking along the lines of survey, but he hasn't done anything at all. Okay. So one thing you need to keep in mind is never send anyone unpolished writing. The email that you saw, I'm not surprised by that email because like I said, I do get emails like this, is very unpolished writing. You also need to think, who is your audience? And this, write it down. Write it down, put it on a piece of paper and put it in front of your office. Whenever you write an email, whenever you develop a survey, whenever you write a paper, you're writing for an audience, a very specific audience. If you do not know who is your audience, you will not do a good job of it. So you need to ask yourself, who is your audience? Now, this is a better version of that email that finally got a reply after 2 weeks. Dear Dr. Chakraverty, I'm a second-year PhD student at the Indian Institute of Survey Management and also the current mess and vendor committee representative who attended your online survey development workshop on June 23rd. So it's jogging my memory. I'm writing to inquire if you would have time for a 30-minute meeting next week or sometime after that. So now giving me a wide frame of time so that I can see when I'm free. To discuss a survey that I want to develop, I would really appreciate some feedback, especially since my survey is at the preliminary stage. So the tone has changed. This person is now asking for help. And in general, people are good. I mean, if they have time, they would be willing to help you, but you have to make that connection with them. I want to investigate the community's experience with easy access to good food at IISM. I have attached a one-page summary of my ideas and a pilot survey I have developed. So this shows me he's serious. He's already put in some time. My schedule is fairly open other than Mondays when I have class. I look forward to meeting with you and discussing my ideas. Thank you for your time. What do you think about this email now? One tip that I follow is in the first line, I introduce myself, and by the second line, I tell the person what I want from them. I should not have to read an entire email and still not be able to figure out what exactly that person wants from me. But would you be more likely to respond to this email, or still you're not that convinced that you should? What do you think?
Yes, ma'am. Now we will respond.
Yes.
But then why did I take 2 weeks?
To understand the theme, to frame the time, and so on.
No. What? I haven't been thinking about it for 2 weeks. It took me 30 seconds.
Very lengthy.
Huh?
It's very lengthy. It's very lengthy.
No, it's not actually lengthy. It's just the right length. And so what? Why would I wait for 2 weeks if it's a lengthy email? I wouldn't read it, right? See, people are busy. People travel. People forget. So you can't expect that just because you wrote an email, the person will immediately respond to it. You have to keep that kind of time. But now you get the context that why is it that the first email never got a response, and how you can build trust, you can show there is some benefit. Benefit is also humanitarian. I am a survey development expert, and if someone tells me that they have developed a pilot survey and they really need my help, I mean, unless I'm really busy, I would help them. And even if I was busy, I would tell them that I'm busy, but come back to me after a month. So there's some benefit. What is the benefit here? That I feel good, that I am helping towards a purpose, towards a cause that I believe. And there's also low cost, because 30 minutes is okay. Even if the discussion goes on for an hour, I think I can give that kind of time. Now, what about the survey itself? So Sarvesh came to my office. He showed me the landing page that you call, or the cover letter. And this is what it looked like. Review survey of food vendors on campus. Dear all, the Mess and Vendor Committee at IISM wants to understand the perception of the community towards the various food vendors on campus. The survey will help in further decision-making of the mess com. We request you to kindly fill the survey. The survey is anonymous. We do not need your email ID. In case you wish to select more than one outlet, say 3 outlets, please fill the survey multiple times. Thank you, Sarvesh Datta. Who is he and his email ID? Can you tell me one point about cost, one about benefit, and one about trust from this message?
Time-wise, it's like the person needs to submit 3 times. That, that's kind of goes against. All right. Benefit also, if someone really reads it, maybe will kind of get to understand. Thanks.
Yeah. Time-wise, the person tells me that if I go to 3 food outlets, I have to fill it up thrice, and that is not desirable. People just will not do it, or even if they are forced to do it, they will just take quick shortcuts and fill out something that is not true. Look at that line. The survey will help in further decision making of the mess community. So you really haven't talked about the benefit to the participant. You are still talking about you at the center, your mess committee at the center. You're still talking in that language. The language has to be changed. You have to keep your participant at the center. And there is some trust. The person has at least given an email ID where I could reach out to, but it's not a personal email ID. That's fine. But there is some kind of trust. So at this point, I look at this message. I know it needs a lot of improvement, but I ask Sarvesh if he can show me the actual pilot survey that he's going to do. And he's going to do an online survey, but he has a paper copy of it. So it doesn't look very polished, but it still is a pilot version. So now do you see the IISM food outlet survey as a PDF? You do, right? Good, good. Again, there's a message on the top. It still doesn't tell the person how much time is it going to take them to fill out a survey. Very important point in making a decision. You have to tell them how much time is it going to take. You have to do that. Okay. So the first paragraph is we are trying to understand the ISM community's preferences and factors while choosing a food outlet. The data will be analyzed at an aggregate level and not an individual level. This survey is for internal purposes of the mess and vendor committee and research purposes as required. This is a very ambiguous statement. No one knows what is internal purpose, what is required, what is research purpose. I mean, people just write it and they don't realize that it doesn't mean anything to the participant. What exactly are you going to do with the data that I give you? Thanks for your time. Again, there's a hello. There's no personalized way of greeting. But okay, I'm just going through the survey and we all are members of ISM. So we'll together go through the survey. These arrows shows parts of the surveys that I want you to look at. Now, the second part is which of the following food outlets, the first question, do you visit regularly? And there are 9 options here. Students' Mess, La Jaldi, Cafe Culinary Delight, the Incrediburger, Cafe Bahubali, Nonsense Dining, Amul Parlors, Tea Post, Chocolate Room. These are the 9 options. So if someone goes to all 9, then you fill it up 9 times. That's the assumption. Now, the second question is, how satisfied, dissatisfied were you with the overall experience at the chosen food outlet? You have 7 options. Similarly, how pleasant or unpleasant were your feelings at the chosen food outlet? Then there are 7 options. We'll just go through it. We'll discuss this later. Okay, let me know if you want to go, if you want me to go slower. And then the third question actually has a series of part-by-part questions, but all of them have this same 7-point scale, strongly disagree to strongly agree. So eating experience at the food outlet, please rate the chosen food outlet on the following statements of 1, strongly agree, and 7, strongly agree. The preparation service time for food is reasonable, the kitchen serving is clean and hygienic, and blah, blah, blah. So there are multiple questions that the person has to answer. The next part of the survey, question 4 to 8 are for only one outlet, which is the student mess. Do you want Chinese to continue? Yes, no, no preference. How frequently would you like to have oily items in breakfast? Giving some examples, and then 4 options. Never, I hate oily stuff. Once, I can't take more oil. 2 to 3 times, and no preference. Question 6, you have to list 5 most preferred breakfast options, and then there's a long list of breakfast items. Similarly, question 7, you have to list 5 disliked breakfast options, and now there is a long list of breakfast items. Then an open-ended question, please suggest some breakfast items you would like to add to the menu. Question 9, would you recommend this vendor to continue the services or not? They list all the vendors. The answer options are yes, no, I don't care. Question 10, again, for each outlet, you have to say how was the taste, hygiene, employee attitude, value for money, waiting time, overall experience. Any comments? And the last question is, please select your category. You have completed the survey. Thank you for your time. My question to you is, do you think you'll fill out a survey like this? Not at all, or maybe some of you might. You are on the fence.
No.
No one? Is there anyone who would actually fill out the survey? And if you do, would you fill it out diligently? Would you look at every question, every wording, and do exactly what is required of you? Why not? Does it all come down to cost, benefit, and time? And trust? Okay, some of you are showing me the unhappy button. So this is not a well-designed survey at all. I haven't made up this survey. The names are fictitious, but these are the kind of surveys that I see being floated around me. So we'll look at this survey a little bit later. I mean, there are many things that are problematic here. But or do you want to pick up maybe the 3 big points that you hated in the survey? Like really big points.
Some of the questions he had made it compulsory, which sometimes may not be okay to me. If I don't fill up that, I am not able to go further.
Can you give an example?
For example, in the question number 3, he has given option A, the preparation / service time for food is reasonable. So I need, and he had made the star marks for all the questions. It means I need to answer all those questions, whether they are applicable to me or they may not be applicable to me.
It may not be applicable to me.
Yeah, because sometimes something is not applicable to me. So I don't want to fill up that thing.
Yeah, so it's called a forced choice response. You're forced to choose something, but it doesn't apply to you. Good. Second, anyone else maybe what's again very problematic with the survey?
It was mentioned that if someone wants to do for more than one outlet, then they have to fill the survey that many times.
Yeah.
But in the single survey, they have already incorporated 3 or 4 outlets. But if I don't go to one of the outlets, I have to again fill for those also for completing the survey. So that is an ambiguous thing that is working on here.
True, it is ambiguous for now because this is also a paper survey, a pilot survey. He's come to my office to ask what kind of a survey. So yeah, you're right. This definitely needs to be fixed. What else is problematic here?
There's this very dissatisfied and very unpleasant. I don't know.
I can't hear you. If you could be a little bit louder.
There's this very dissatisfied, very unpleasant thing, those kind of options. So generally we kind of look at it as one and then we feel the same. Maybe I don't know if that's the case.
Okay, the last part I could not hear you clearly. What are you saying?
So here it strikes as very, here you have something like very dissatisfied and very satisfied and very unpleasant, very pleasant. Maybe I'm not able to articulate it well, sorry. But I strongly felt about the question 3 actually, where it had so many, so many points, right? And it just too much gets on to the nerves actually to kind of fill this kind of a thing.
Yeah.
That way. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. I'll point out some big problematic things, but there are many small things that are problematic in this survey. First of all, let's go back to the first page. Hello. There's no personalized way of greeting. Hello, who? Who is this hello? And it always makes a difference when you have a personalized way of greeting. That doesn't mean you have to know everyone's name and you have to call them by their last name. But you could say, dear IISM community members, because that would include everyone that they think should be filling out the survey. The second problematic thing is you haven't told me how much time it will take, and it's most likely going to take me 15 to 20 minutes if I fill it out very carefully. The third problematic thing you've already pointed out, that if I go to all 9 outlets, then I have to fill it out 9 times. I don't have the time. The fourth thing is a lot of these questions, the preparation time, the service time, they do not apply to all these places. If you go to an Amul parlor where you just pay and you buy something, you buy your yogurt, your curd, your milk, your ice cream. So there's no preparation time. There's no, it's a very quick in and quick out kind of thing. Similarly, a little bit maybe for tea post, for chocolate room, a place where you're buying ready-made products, these questions do not apply. So Survesh hasn't taken care. And my apologies to anyone here whose name is Survesh or whose name is Sarvesh Datto. This is just a fictional person. I hope you really don't mind me making up this name. But that is one of the problems. The other problem here is, look at the question. How satisfied, dissatisfied were you? Now, so you're first asking satisfied and then asking dissatisfied. But in your answer choices, you're starting with dissatisfied and ending with satisfied. You have flipped the order. That itself creates cognitive burden. It could lead to measurement error that we'll talk about in a bit. Also, it's a crime not to label all the anchors, because now let's say you're leaving it to the person to make up their mind about what 4 looks like. So 4 is what? Like neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, or maybe for 5 it looks like, okay, fine, maybe I'm somewhat satisfied. It's very ambiguous. And you do surveys because you want to measure something. Now you can't measure something if you're leaving it to the people to make up their own mind about what a 3 means, what a 4 means, and what a 5 means. So always label all your anchors. The next thing is, how pleasant or unpleasant were your feelings? What kind of feelings is he talking about? I mean, I'm I go to a food outlet, I order, I pay, I take my food, I eat, I come back. So there's no feelings involved here. So this question itself doesn't make sense. There are many problems here. The big problem here is there's a series of questions and you are just filling out a 7-point scale. I don't even think a 7-point scale is needed. A 5-point should have been fine. But people get bored when they fill out the same kind of questions. And eventually what people do, if they really dislike it, they will do all once. If they really like it, they'll do all 7. Or if they don't care, they'll put all 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5. So really people are not answering what they are supposed to answer. Also, the preparation and service time for food is reasonable. The word reasonable is very ambiguous. If I'm in a hurry to go and teach in class, even a 3-minute delay comes at a high cost to me. Whereas it's the weekend, I'm bored, I have a lot of time to kill, I could wait for 15 minutes, I wouldn't mind waiting. Or if I'm chatting with a friend at that outlet, 15 minutes, 20 minutes is fine, I don't mind. So instead of asking that the preparation or service time for food is reasonable, you need to define what is reasonable for your participants. Do not let your participants define what reasonable means. A much better question to ask would be, on an average, how long does it take for the food to reach you once you have ordered? Less than 5 minutes, or maybe less than 30 minutes, more than 30 minutes, define. Also, there's one question that should have been in the beginning here. How regularly do you go to these outlets? Maybe once a week, maybe once in 2 weeks, once a month, or every day, because you don't even know. Maybe you've been to Cafe Bahubali and had a very bad experience, and now your entire survey will be biased because you had a poor experience. So as a survey maker, I need to know how often do you go to a particular place before you answer that for me. Is it making sense so far? Okay. Just raise your hand, show me a button or something if it makes sense, because I can't see all of you. Okay, thank you. Also, the kitchen and serving and eating areas are clean and hygienic. You never see a kitchen area. So you're now asking me a question that I cannot answer because I don't go to the kitchen area to see where my food is being prepared. The food outlet provides sufficient payment options. I only need 1 or 2 options. In fact, if you give me more options, I'll be confused. So instead of asking that, you could ask that what are the payment options that you prefer and if they are available or not. Food outlet has good ambience, freshly prepared. See, you never know if food is freshly prepared. You only know when the food has gone stale. So again, it's hard to gauge if the food is freshly prepared. Value for this H is a very ambiguous question depending on who is filling it out. The food outlet provides value for money. Now, as a faculty, my spending power is much more than what a student could be spending. So for me, value for money means a completely different thing than what it would for a student. The 2 people from the same institute filling out the same survey, but now we are thinking of different things in terms of value of money. So don't make it ambiguous for your participants. Just tell them what is it that you want to know. The quality of ingredients used is up to the mark. Again, I have no way to gauge that till something actually goes bad. Packaging of food for takeaways is up to the marks. So now they're talking about takeaway. So far, I thought this is about eating experience at that place, dining experience, but looks like this is also about takeaways. The operating hours are reasonable. What exactly is reasonable? I mean, I go to sleep by like 11 p.m., but there are students who stay up all night and they might prefer a place that's open all night. So what's reasonable to me is not reasonable to another person. Again, that makes it very ambiguous. The orders are handled well with less or few mistakes. What is less and what is few? You haven't defined it. Ideally, you want no mistakes, or maybe once in a while, one mistake. So again, this doesn't make any sense. The food outlet is convenient to reach. Reach from where? Usually food outlets are located in certain central places. Now, just because my home is far away is not their fault. So this question again doesn't make any sense. The ordering process is convenient. There's a spelling mistake constantly here. It's not student's mess. Student is plural here, the apostrophe. So you need to make sure that you're not making those mistakes also. Do you want Chinese to continue? Chinese what? Chinese newspaper to continue, Chinese what to continue, Chinese person to continue. You haven't specified that do you want Chinese food to continue? And why is this question even being asked? Similarly, how frequently would you like to have oily items? This is a very biased question. Do you think, even if I love oily food, do you think I would say that I love oily food? Every time I go, that's what I crave. Please keep it. No one is going to admit to that. It's a socially undesirable answer. So do not ask biased questions. The other problem is the moment you've asked me question 5, my response to question 6 will change. It is something called the question order effect. The way ordering of the questions affect the way a particular survey will be filled out. So if I've already answered that I do not like oily food here in question 5, then I would not choose these options even if I prefer it, right? Because then there'll be a mismatch. So this produces a lot of question order effect. And think about it, this is a student mess. The menu is already decided. It's not a place where I go and I order food. So what is the point of giving me these options when the menu is already decided? Instead, you can do interviews with a few people and see what is problematic with the menu and what is not. The other point is if you, first of all, don't give so many options for people to read, but if you must provide so many options, put them alphabetically. A similar question would be, what state in India do you live in? You know the answer to that. I live in Gujarat, so I don't have to go through Andhra and all the A, B, C, D states to find out my answer. I should just be able to, use the drop-down menu, go to G and click on Gujarat. Similarly, I know what are the things I prefer, more or less. And I know where they stand alphabetically. So that makes it easier for me to fill out that survey. The same thing for the dislike breakfast options. Please suggest some breakfast options you would like to be added to the menu. Why? I mean, I would want mutton biryani, but they are not going to add it. So why are you asking me these questions? Again, similarly, very hard to answer. You have to make sense of the horizontal line and the vertical line and match it up. A lot of cognitive processing. So not a good way of writing up this question. Same thing for student mess. Same thing for La Jaldi. Any comments? Any comments about what? Tell me what is the answer that you want and I'll write it. The last one is please select your category. Human beings are not categories. So don't call me a category. If you want information, then ask me the exact question. That what is your role at this institute or who are you? Something that makes sense and doesn't dehumanize me as a category. The other thing that I don't know if you have noticed, is there are more people who live on campus. What about family people? I mean, family members of these people who live on campus. They also go and buy food. They also go and eat food. But you have not included that as an option. So where do I click if I am a family member? That is something to think about. Now, what all these things do is they lead to error, a lot of survey error. So is it fairly clear, this survey? Does it make sense? Can we go back to the slides?
Ma'am.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I have one point.
Yeah.
So in each question, ma'am, point regarding the order of the scale. Okay, so in each question, there is strongly disagree in the left hand side and strongly.
I can't hear you. You need to be louder.
Hello.
Yeah.
Ma'am, is it audible now?
It's audible, but speak loudly and slowly.
Okay. Ma'am, it's about the order of the scale. Okay. Every time in each question, there is strongly disagree in the left hand side and strongly agree in the right hand side.
Yeah.
So sometimes even someone can recklessly fill up the form, fill up the questionnaire in right hand side. Okay. So sometimes we have to alternate the order of the scale so that sometimes they strongly agree in the left hand side and strongly disagree in the right hand side, so that we can find out that whether someone purposefully contemplating in each question they are fill up the form or sometimes not.
So it's not a good idea to do that because that causes extra cognitive load. If you really want to find out if participants are paying attention to the question, you can fill a question like, I am still awake, yes, no, and see what the person says. If you're not reading the question, then you'll say a no, and then you won't consider those answers. But cognitively, it puts a lot of load on the person if you keep flipping. So it's strongly recommended that you do not flip the order. If you start with disagree, then the entire survey should start with disagree. But even more important than that, you should not give the same kind of questions. It's just boring and it's not giving you the information that you need. Because it's more, I mean, there's much more to a story than numbers. If you only want to know satisfied, dissatisfied, then you're not knowing why are people satisfied or why are people not satisfied. Okay.
Yes, thank
All
you.
right. We'll move a little bit quickly in the interest of time. We've already talked about cost, benefit, and trust. People are more likely to give you a favorable social exchange when the rewards of complying are more than the cost of complying. There are costs all the time, but when the reward is more, and reward is not always monetary reward. And when the trust is more than the economic benefits. So not to go through these slides again, because we've already talked of some of these points, but these are the cost of participation that a person would have. It's not just time. It's also, you know, it's too long. People don't understand questions all the time. And that's because you have not written it in a way that people could understand. Or like one of you said, the responses don't apply to me. So what do I do? Or maybe I'm traveling. I don't have access to my to Wi-Fi right now. So how do I fill it out? Or maybe you're calling me too often on the phone when I'm in class and you're bothering me. So that comes at a cost to me. I don't have energy for another survey. Everyone is giving me surveys. I don't have the energy. And why should I fill it out multiple points? You've only given me 5 days to reply. That's not enough. So too narrow a window. The cost is not always money. It's time, energy, cognitive engagement, involvement, even unpleasant memories that could be triggered. If you have a survey on bullying and the person is going back in their life and recalling certain instances that when they were bullied, it triggers certain memories, unpleasant memories. So that also is a cost. So how to decrease, reduce the burden of length, make it shorter. Do not reduce the font, because now it doesn't make your survey short. It just makes it harder for people to read. Reduce the complexity of questions, use visual designs, and we'll talk of visual designs. Make it convenient to respond. Not everyone has access to the internet. So some people may actually prefer a paper survey. And if that is the case, give them a stamped return envelope so that they don't have to do that extra bit. Also, minimize your request for sensitive information. You may need it, but if you need it, then something you can do is change the mode. So if the survey was in person or on telephone, but there are certain sensitive questions, you can say that separately you can fill out the sensitive information in an anonymous online survey. That makes it less uncomfortable. If you have to ask sensitive questions, ask them later in the survey, explain why you are asking them, don't just ask it on their face, and tell them how their information will be protected. One thing that I did not talk about in the ISM food outlet survey is there is no demographic information that was collected. So some of the basic things you need to collect are at least the age group, the sex or gender, and also, if possible, some kind of financial information. Because if you are asking questions about affordability, you also need to see how affordable is something to the people who are filling it out. Now, asking income questions could get sensitive, but there are other ways to work around it. Always avoid subordinating language. And what do I mean by that? For us to solve the problem, the food problems at ISM, it is necessary for you to complete this questionnaire. This is subordinating language, where you as a survey maker are kind of sitting at the center, and you're saying that I need to do this, so you come and fill out this questionnaire. A different and a better way of writing it would be, would you please be a part of helping to solve the access to food issues at ISM? Your responses can assist us or whoever, the committee, in fully understanding the issues of whatever the issue is stated. When you're more transparent and when you say it out like this, people would be more likely to fill out your survey. How do you increase benefit? People are more inclined to participate when they hold membership to a particular group or identity. So see if you could For example, if you are from a particular school and you see that someone from that school has created a survey, you're more likely to take that survey because you used to study in that school. So you have certain affiliation, certain attachment to that particular school or group or maybe company or maybe city. In this case, it would be IISM. This survey is for people at IISM. So make it very explicit. Be transparent about how the survey is going to be useful. Maybe you do surveys that could influence policy making. One thing that you should seriously consider is, do you share the findings of your survey from the people who gave you the data? At most of the times, that's not the case. But someone who has given you time and data would also like to know what happened as a result. What did you find? And that is something that you should consider, sharing the results of your survey with the people who actually gave you the data. Ask interesting question if it's funded by a legitimate organization. So if IIMA is funding the study, I would write that IIMA is funding the study. And use incentives if possible. Now, talking about incentives, we know of surveys or experiments where there's a lottery. We are told that 1 out of 100 people, there'll be a lottery and they will get a large sum of money. Research shows that a little bit of cash before the study, a little bit, not a lot, is more effective than material gift. Because material gift is specific to the person. The person may not like it, but cash is something people can use it. But even that is more effective than larger cash after the study. So instead of giving 2 people 5,000 rupees each, it's more effective if possible. If it is not, then you don't do that. But if possible, then you give 50 rupees to everyone, or 20, or not 20, maybe 30, 40 rupees to everyone. That's enough to get 2 cups of tea. So and that also shows that even before you've taken the survey, someone has given me a little bit of money. So now I will feel more responsible, more obliged to take the survey. Whereas if I know that, okay, I might be a part of a lucky draw and I'm never a winner in those cases, I don't care. Okay. However, it's difficult in a phone survey, it's difficult in an online survey. You can do it only when you know the people and you do in-person surveys. Okay, trust, big factor. There are online banking scams, these emails about millionaires from Saudi Arabia leaving you their assets and millions of dollars, and identity theft. And then information about you could be in the digital space forever. You are not sure who will access your data. You're not sure who's doing the study. So address all these points. Say how long is the data going to be. Just don't say this is for internal purpose or this is for research purpose. Tell them that after 6 months of us doing the analysis, we are going to destroy the data. Or after 1 year, or whatever it makes sense for you to do. Not everyone is doing a food outlet survey. Sometimes you need a longer span of time. But specify how long are you going to hold on to the data? Where are you going to keep it? If it's online, would it be in a password protected computer? Who has access to the computer? If it is on cloud, then I don't know, how would you assure them of the safety? So make sure that you are addressing all these points even before you have given them the survey. There are different ways of establishing trust. You should always give your email ID or phone number or a link to your, for me, I would always give a link to my faculty webpage so that people can go and see that I do exist, I am an authentic person. Build upon previously established relationships. So if you've met these people at a conference before, or if you work together in some training program, remind them that, hey, we met at this training program, and jog their memory. A little bit of token of appreciation in advance, if possible. Say how you'll protect the data. Write a very professional, personalized cover letter on the letterhead. If it's relevant, then you can add relevant pictures of the institutions, because pictures, there's a visual effect to that. And also provide information about the survey project itself. What is it? What are you going to do? What are you going to use it for? Emails should be engaging. It should be short. It should be to the point. The first few lines should highlight the key information. Use a shortened URL. Don't give like a URL, a link that's 3 lines long. The first thing someone sees is the subject line. So write a proper subject line. Don't make clickbaits out of that. Use a professional email address. If possible, then use your official email address instead of something like a dancing diva 1234. Don't send messages from email IDs like that. Don't give these generic emails on general notice board and faculty notice board where you expect everyone to read it, because then, it's not personalized. And do not keep people in CC and BCC, because that again makes people suspicious that who else is getting this survey. It's a lot of work, actually. Implementing surveys is a lot of work than we think. It's just that we don't think about all these things, but then we should. So for a survey to be well designed, you have to write a question that everyone will understand, but also a question that everyone will answer and answer correctly. You might understand the question, but you may not want to answer it correctly. Okay, and you have to also make sure that adequate number of people return the survey. So to do that, there's only one way of doing that. You have to get into the responder's state of mind. You have to look at a survey as if you are taking the survey and not as if you are making the survey. I'll skip the first part. But you need to think about how to create questions. That depends on what you want to be answered in the survey. What is your concept of interest? In another example, let's just say that you want to investigate how does education affect well-being. So you are thinking of 2 things here. One is education and the other one is well-being, right? So you take education first and think about the different things that you could cover in education. It could be formal education, it could be informal education. Within each, there are specific things like how many years they have spent, was it public or private, how many classes were taken, what classes were taken, what was the size of the school. And within each subcategory, now write down the questions that you want answered. Same thing for informal education. So just break up a big chunk of concept into smaller concepts and sub-concepts and sub-concepts, and then start making your questions. Don't start creating your questions first. First, write down what you want to be answered. Same thing for well-being. If you're asking about well-being, it could be physical well-being, it could be mental well-being, it could be financial well-being. And within each, you'll ask certain questions. You can also use certain scales within a survey. I hope all of you know the difference between a survey and a scale. A scale is a specialized kind of survey. We won't go into the detail, but a scale is very different from a survey. A survey could have multiple scales, but a scale is generally used to measure a construct, a latent construct that you cannot measure directly. So you ask a bunch of questions that are all looking at that same construct. For example, a happiness scale. How do you measure happiness? You ask a bunch of questions that all in a way relate to happiness, which is why the items of a scale on their own do not mean anything. You always have to take them together. But that is a different thing. That's more about scales. You can use certain scales within your survey. That is fine. But don't give a survey which is just a bunch of scales. That is not interesting. So where do surveyors go wrong? Think about how many times you've ignored a survey, or how long did it take you? For me, it takes me 2 seconds to ignore a survey. And there are so many reasons that people ignore surveys. Now, where do surveyors go wrong? The first email is very short. Or something like survey enclosed, respond immediately. I don't care. Or this is Dr. Chakraborty calling from IISM. I need to ask you a few questions, but you haven't told me why, right? I have included 50 rupees. I don't care about 50 rupees. And these are all the typical first lines that people use. Or my school or my employer needs this information. I don't care that your school needs this information. Or is this spam? Will they bother me tomorrow? There are so many different reasons why surveyors go wrong. Or you're continuously sending email requests with the same wording. You haven't even changed the wording. Gentle reminders are not gentle. So don't write gentle reminders. They are really passive-aggressive messages. Then again, you do a non-customized impersonal message, like dear sir or ma'am. There's a better way of addressing someone than sir and ma'am, right? Dear faculty member, or dear IISM community member, or dear PhD student. See if you can make your greeting or your salutation gender neutral. So instead of sticking to sir and ma'am, which is not gender neutral, dear faculty is a gender neutral term. It could be a male faculty, it could be a female faculty. So keep your salutation gender neutral. Do not start with a sensitive question like how much was your household income last year? That should not be your first question. Okay. What all these lead to are low response rates and also non-response error. What causes survey errors is a combination of the survey maker's behavior and the respondent's behavior. You need multiple modes of communication and multiple modes of data collection. We'll talk about specific examples, but you have to have a plan for recruitment effort. You can't just create a survey and give it out to everyone. You have to have a plan for a recruitment effort. Okay. What are the different modes of survey implementation? One is online mode. The other one is telephone mode. So you ask questions over the phone. The third one is in-person mode. So you ask face-to-face. The fourth one is a paper survey. You ask it in a paper mode. There could be single administration. There could be multiple administrations. So multiple times you ask for information using different modes. Okay. But overall, when you do a survey, I would really urge you to sit down and do a CBT analysis for your participants. How are you going to decrease their cost, increase their benefit, and improve their trust? You have to have that analysis plan in place. So these are the different kinds of mixed mode surveys. You first tell someone online that you are going to survey them and then give them a call. Don't just give them a call out of the blue. Okay. Like I said, if you have sensitive questions, use a slightly different mode for those sensitive questions so that a person is not asking you upfront for those questions. You can also use different modes to collect responses from different people. In the IISM food outlet survey, students and faculty have access to the internet. But contractual workers do not have access to internet all the time or not at all. They still go and get their food, they may be. In that case, you have to do an in-person survey or a paper survey. So the same population, different populations will have different modes of surveys that they can respond to. If you do not include people, those people, then again, you'll be increasing a certain kind of error in your survey that we'll talk about. Okay. All right. So overall, balance is the key. The idea is to improve response rate and not response bias. Now, here is another activity that I want you to read. Dr. Chakraborty wants to learn more about dogs on ISM campus. She has asked Sarvesh Datta to design a survey and understand the opinions of the ISM community about dogs on campus. He quickly consulted a statistician who recommended a minimum sample size of 125 to get generalizable results. He contacted everyone from an MBA elective class for the second year by email and asked them to fill a survey entitled, "Are Dogs a Menace on Campus?" Proudly, he shared this with Dr. Chakraborty, who is now very upset because she thinks Sarvesh's understanding of surveys is weak. What happened? Do you understand the situation? What is problematic about this situation?
It's like they've concluded and they're asking for an opinion.
What do you mean?
are dogs a menace on campus? It's more probable that they will say yes. That's
Or no.
Yeah. But it's more highly probable that they would say yes to this question.
Or only those people who think dogs are a menace on campus will respond.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
True.
If you don't think it, then you don't need to waste time answering a survey. So you'll only get certain kinds of responses.
Yeah.
It's a biased survey. It's a biased title. Good. What else is wrong?
The sample size is also influenced over here. It's only one class that he has picked up instead of taking a more distributed sample.
Yeah. Exactly. So one elective class does not represent the entire campus. What else?
Ma'am, the purpose of the study was not explained. Why they were called, they never explained that. In the first,
yeah, the title itself is biased. So that itself shows the purpose, that I want to know about dogs. Right? Keep thinking about what else is wrong. In the meantime, we'll talk of a related concept that will help you understand this better. The concept of sampling and errors. Sampling and errors. There are, broadly speaking, very basic, at the very basic level, there are two kinds of sampling. Probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Okay. Two kinds of sampling, probability sampling and non-probability sampling. What is probability sampling? Probability sampling is when every member of the population has an equal and a non-zero chance of getting selected. So it's possible that you could be randomly including every fourth or fifth member in the community. So everyone has an equal chance of getting selected. It's not that certain groups will be completely ignored. In the previous examples, only those who were in that class were selected. The others were completely ignored. So that is not probability sampling. Both kinds of samplings are used, but they are for different reasons. Probability samples are used when you want your results to be generalizable across the entire population. I hope you're clear about the concept of population and a sample. A population is the entire group of whatever you are studying. A sample is only a small representative of the population. So when you measure something, you measure a population parameter using a sample statistic. When you do probability sampling, if you do it well, there would be errors, but errors would be minimized and your findings could be generalizable. Now, what happened with the dog survey is whatever the findings are, that is only restricted to the people who took the survey. You cannot say that the entire campus thinks like this. You cannot make those claims. In case of non-probability sample, so when you do, let's say, convenience sampling, you choose certain people because you know them, or it's convenient to reach them. Or snowball sampling. Snowball sampling is when you've taken a survey and I told you that please share the survey with other people in your network. So more people get to know about it and more people take it. So convenience sample, snowball sample, they are called non-probability sampling. They also have their uses, but the findings will not be generalizable across a population. Whatever you find will only be specific to that sample. You cannot make broader claims about the population. Make sense? Okay. So kind of sampling, for probability sampling, you can have a simple random sampling. There are 1,000 people in a population. Let's say on this in this IISM, there are 10,000 people. You do a simple random sampling, and random doesn't mean what we understand by random, that picking up anyone you want. No, there's randomness to it. So you can use a simple random number generator. Everyone has a number to them and you pick up certain people. Then you can do clustering. Clustering typically you do in schools with different sections. Let's say class 6 has 10 sections. You randomly choose a section and then sample everyone in that section. That is called clustering. You can also do stratification, which is you stratify your population based on certain characteristics. Let's say at IISM, you know that 60% of the population are women and 40% are men. Then you do a simple random sampling so that your sample is also 60% women and 40% men. That is called stratify. You can stratify based on gender, you can stratify based on class, earning power, anything that makes sense to your survey. Okay. Then you can do oversampling or disproportionate sampling, which is when there are certain populations that are very hard to reach, people in remote village areas or people in tribal areas. They're not so easy to reach from here, which is when you will oversample them. And then for non-probability sampling, you have convenience, snowball sampling, etc., etc. Okay. Now, there are 4 kinds of survey error, and they're fairly simple to understand. Coverage error is when you are not covering certain units of your population. So if you are surveying a school and you want to know about something across the school, but you are only surveying the teachers, then you are not surveying the students, you're not surveying the staff, you're not surveying other stakeholders in the school. There's a coverage error to it. If you do an online internet survey and float it to all people in Gujarat, there'll be coverage error because not all people in Gujarat have the same access to internet compared to floating a survey at IISM. So that would be coverage error. What happens is the sample does not represent the population that is being measured. Certain groups are excluded from the sampling frame. Okay. Similarly here, if you only survey women about the consumption of packaged goods, there are men who buy packaged goods, and also there are men who make these financial decisions. There are single people households with men. So you're not including, you're not covering that. That is called coverage error. A sampling error is a random difference from sample to sample. You choose a sample either by simple random sampling or by some other random method. But every time you choose, it's like tossing a coin. If you do it 10 times, you expect that 5 times it will be the head and 5 times it will be the tail. But it could be 3 times head and 7 times tail, right? Which is why you need to do it enough number of times, let's say 100 times or 1,000 times, so that the distribution becomes 50-50 as you increase the sample size. Now, keep this in mind. Wherever there is sample, there will be sampling error. You cannot get rid of sampling error. The only time where you can avoid sampling error is when there is no sample, when you are surveying everyone, which is in case of a census. But there will be other kinds of errors. Sampling error will be minimized. But whenever there is a sample, there will be sampling error. Non-response error happens when the respondents differ from the non-respondents. A good example to understand this would be these faculty evaluations. End of the term, students evaluate faculty, right? And there's a lot of numeric questions. Typically, only the outliers, unless it's compulsory, only the outliers will answer the survey. So only those who loved the course or who hated a course are going to spend time writing the survey. If you've had an okay experience and you don't care, you will not. What it does is the number that the faculty gets at the end of this evaluation is a very skewed bias number, because only those who hated the course or loved the course wrote the survey. It's the same thing for the reviews you see in Amazon or Myntra. You'll see some people just loved it, and most people either loved it or hated it. Because if you are in the middle, then there's no enough incentive to fill out the survey. So when the respondents differ from the non-respondents, that is when you get a non-response error. One way to make it better is to increase your sample size. The more you increase I mean, within your sample, you urge more people to participate. If only 30% people have participated so far, urge more people to participate. The larger the response rate, the lower the non-response error would be. And the last one is measurement error. Anything that is related to the survey questionnaire itself, and how are you approaching people, and how are you asking your questions. Everything relates to measurement error. Okay, let's say if there are 5 people who are doing in-person surveying, going door to door, but 5 of them speak, I mean, they talk out their questions in different ways. One person is very fast, so the person who's giving answers cannot understand, so they'll just reply something, whereas the other person takes their time and explains the question. Measurement error is whenever you are measuring something wrongly. Even question order effect is an example of measurement error. So a lot of the things that we will do now, we'll look at visual representation of surveys, actually looks at how can we minimize measurement error. You cannot completely get rid of errors. Your job is to minimize error. And there are different ways of doing it. You can pilot test your instrument. You can get responder feedback. You can do a think aloud protocol. If you email me at the end of this talk, I'll be happy to share the slides with you so that you can take more time and go through. Okay. Now, tell me, person A samples the entire population of 1,000 people and gets 300 respondents, 30% response rate. Please mute your mic. Person B randomly sampled 500 people and still gets 300 people to respond with a 60% response rate. Which one is a better study design? Which is a better study design? A or B?
B.
Why?
Because there is greater response rate, 60%. It means people were more responsive.
That's why?
Yeah.
So your answer is right, but your reasons are not completely right. There are more reasons. B is a better design, not only because of high response rate, but high response rate means low response error. In the first case, 700 people did not respond. In the second case, 200 people did not respond. And also because simple random sampling is a much better design than surveying everyone. So whenever you talk about a quality of a survey, don't just talk about your response rate, but also talk about your non-response error. All right. So now I think we all know why I was unhappy with this study design. Let's think of coverage error. The survey did not cover a lot of the groups that live on campus and that could be affected by dogs in a positive or negative way. There's a sampling error because there was no sample. It was not done using a probability sampling. He just did a convenience sampling. So there's no sample. There is a sample, but it's not a probable, there's no probability sampling. Non-response error. Now, this one, we do not know how many people responded, but again, it's a very skewed sample and it's possible that out of the people he contacted, a lot of people did not respond. And huge measurement error. You're already asking, are dogs a menace on campus? So most likely only people who think that dogs are a menace on campus are going to respond to the survey. You will never get a balanced view. You should not even frame your survey title. A better way to frame would be human-animal interaction on campus. That is not biased. Something like that, right? Okay. Now, very quickly, we'll move on to the visual representation of survey questions. This is all to minimize measurement error. How can you do a better job of visually representing your survey question? When you get a piece of paper or a survey or a document, you don't start reading right away. The first instinct is to scroll down and see how long that document is, right? And this is the way our brain functions. First, we try to make sense for the first few milliseconds of basic page layout. Then we look at the information organization. So when I see this book, the first thing I see is the basic page layout. Then I start to see some of the sections. And only then I start reading the text. Reading the text happens at the third stage. So this is first what you see. Then you start making more sense of the sections and the subsections, and then you start reading. Now, placing visual elements closely together will cause them to be perceived as a group. This is the Distal Grouping principle. What are the common elements? If you are asking questions about academic history, ask all of them together at the same time. And then move to the next subsection. If in the next subsection you are asking about work history, all the questions should be asking about your work history or your work experience. Don't mix it up. So creating good subsections will help in this kind of a visual processing. The second thing is, if you want data in a particular format, you specify the format. It's called symbolic instruction, the fourth example. So if you say month and year and the boxes have the same size, you don't know how to, if September should be written as September or 09 or how, right? So if you want information as MM and YYYY, give a smaller box, but under the box, write MM. Give a larger box for year, and under the box, write YYYY. Similarly, this is a very poorly designed question. You do not know where the question ends and where the answer choices are. There are different fonts. Some of them are in bold, some of them are not. You have underlined certain things. This doesn't make sense visually. Okay. A much better way to write out this question is like this, where the question stem is different from the answer choices. The question is in bold, and you have underlined specific information that you want, which is you only want one answer. Here, when you write other, you have also given a box so that the person can fill out what that other is. Customize your answer space for the response task. So if you want to tell me what are the key things that you have learned this week after this workshop, and if I give you a small box, then either you will not type, because the more you type, the more the text shifts and you can't read what you're typing, or you'll give me a shorter answer. So if I want a 50-word answer, I should tell you that I want between 50 to 70 words. If I want to learn about 3 key things that you have learned, then this is how I would organize: key learning 1, key learning 2, and key learning 3, and give a big enough box where you can see what you are typing. Same thing here. I'll skip the repetitive slides. Now, in this case, if you see, overall, how would you describe your experiences at IISM? We read from left to right or right to left, depending on what language we are reading, which is true in the first case. But again, you have to go back to the second line and read it. In the second case, this is like moving. I mean, in the first case, it's moving, zigzag, excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. In this case, it's going like this. A good way to do it is to arrange it in the third way. It's much more easy to read and understand. Same thing for here. Each anchor, each option should be equidistant from the other one. Here in the first case, these 4 are very close to each other, and these 3 are far apart. So really the midpoint looks like this, but actually the midpoint is average. So you have to space out the options so that they are equidistant from each other. Same thing here, and this, they have done an experiment. When the design looked like this, 38% people, more people selected the first option, because the first option looked very wordy, whereas the last 3 options did not have as much space between them. But when you space it out in this way, fewer people chose the first option, because now they got a chance to read all the options and then choose which was applicable to them. One thing you have to think about is if your visual and conceptual midpoints are aligned. A visual midpoint is when you see something, what is the midpoint of that? But when you're measuring a concept, you have to, there's also a midpoint for that. In this case, in the first case, very much approve, somewhat approve, neither approve nor disapprove. So that is the conceptual midpoint. That is also the visual midpoint. The problem is the moment you add two more options, which is don't know and no option, now you have 7 different things. So your conceptual midpoint is still the same, the third option, but now your visual midpoint has shifted to the fourth option. It causes cognitive load. One way to get rid of it is to add a gap here for non-substantive options. So if you have don't know or no option, add a gap after your first 5 options and then give those options. The basic idea being your visual midpoint and conceptual midpoint should always be the same. Okay. Now, kind of questions. There are factual questions, questions that only have one answer. What year were you born? How old are you? Much better to ask what year were you born rather than how old are you? Because then I'm doing a calculation. If I'm born at a particular year, I'm doing a plus and minus in my head. Much better to ask which year or what year were you born. Then there are contextual questions that in your opinion, what in your opinion, if something is effective or not, very effective, somewhat effective, little effective, not effective. The other way to ask the same question is a great deal, a fair amount, not very much, almost none. We all have seen these kind of questions. Then there are some slider questions. You slide your answer somewhere here. So you don't choose 4 options among the 4 options, but you slide your scale. That's one way to ask the same question. The challenge with retrospective questions is we have recall problems, our memory fades with time, and we do not group information in our brains based on date and month and year. We do it on the basis of intensity of those feelings that we had. So you may not remember what you ate on Monday for lunch. You might have to think a little bit, but you might remember what was your menu at your wedding or what did you wear at your wedding. Although that might have been quite a long time back. So we remember information differently, which is why you could make questions clear by giving definitions. Definitions should be clear and definitions should not cause bias. So in the last example, if you say that smoking is linked to cancer, it could harm people who smoke as well as those who are nearby. Do you smoke cigarettes? People are more likely to say no, because you've given them a very biased example. Okay. I'll skip this because I've talked about it. Just one thing to remember, people hear and read things differently. So the same survey, depending on whether someone is reading the survey or someone is here listening to the questions, they will process information differently. Also, there's something called primacy and recency. Primacy is what you first read or what you first hear. Recency is what you most recently read or what you most recently hear. Now, if there's a long list of options, like in that, what 5 items do you prefer for breakfast? And you're reading the entire list. Certain items that you read at the beginning, when you read them, will be in your memory. But if you're hearing this question over your phone, you're more likely to remember what you just heard, which is the later items. And that is why primacy and recency could be a factor in how people read and how people hear. Is there a quick question that we can take?
Yes, madam.
Yeah.
Actually, would you suggest any number of items that should ideally be in a list? Like, for example, items more than 8, or if there's a threshold, items more than 10 in a list will not be, it will go beyond cognition or something like that.
Good.
Will not be clear.
Yeah, good question. So first of all, you don't need to know maybe more than 3 things, right? Like how many websites do you go for online shopping? Do I really need to tell you 10 websites? Maybe you need the top 3. It will vary from question to question, but in some case, you don't need that information. Or how many times have you taken a flight in the past 5 years? Maybe you don't need information for 5 years. Maybe how many times in the last 6 months have you taken a flight? So you reduce the amount of time in which you have to go back and recall your memory. About anchors, I would not give more than 4 or 5. And I have examples where I show you a unipolar and a bipolar scale, but maybe you don't need that kind of precision. You just need the top 3 or the top 2 things.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Now, have you ever shoplifted from a store? Even if I have, do you think I'll say yes? No, I will not. Socially undesirable question. So there's a better way of asking this question. What is a better way? You have to use the term shoplifted, because that's a problematic term for me, right? You can ask, have you ever taken anything from a store without paying for it? It means the same thing, but it softens the blow. Even better, if you have a sensitive question like this, don't make it a standalone question. Make it as a part of the larger group of questions. So first ask in a one large question, how often do you go shopping? What type of stores do you shop at? And the third sub question is, have you ever taken something from a store without paying for it? Don't make it a standalone question. I'll skip this. This is from a book where, when we look at a question, we are not just reading a question. We perceive something, then we comprehend the question, then we retrieve information from our head, then we judge whether we could write it this way or that way, and then we frame a response. So it's not an easy task to quickly frame a response, which is why it takes time. And the easier you make it for me to remember, the better it is for me. You find many funny things on the internet, and this is what I found, that how people comprehend things differently. Right, greater or lesser, but the way the person comprehended it is, or I don't know how to show this here. Yeah. Or find X. Well, here is X. So different people comprehend a question differently. Now, what were you doing on the evening of Mumbai attacks? What were you doing when India won the 2011 World Cup? It's hard for you to go back and remember what exactly were you doing, right? Not specific question. You haven't told me which Mumbai attack. Mumbai has been attacked several times. So ask, what were you doing in the evening of 2008 Mumbai attacks? Be specific. Also in the second case, be a little more specific about what happened in that India World Cup, because maybe you've forgotten after 10, 11 years what had happened. And then ask, what were you doing around that time? How many times in the past year did you watch a movie? Now you expect me to think, okay, past year, what does it count? The entire 2021 or maybe from June 2021? Not so clear. You are making me do a lot of brain work with this kind of a question. So how about this? In 2021, many Bollywood movies released, such as this, this, and this. How many movies did you watch at home in 2021? Now you are making it a little more specific. But this is a problematic question, because now you have primed me to think only about Bollywood movies. But the question is about movies. There are also movies that are not Bollywood movies. So you have to be careful in the examples that you give. Maybe you don't need information for 1 year. Maybe the last 30 days is fine. So in the past 30 days, how many movies did you watch? You can include movies you watched at home as well as at a movie theater, now that theaters have opened up. The third question is a more specific question that you could ask. Okay, I'll skip this slide. Now, anatomy of survey questions, and this comes from surveys that ask the same kind of questions over and over again, where you choose 1 to 5, 1 to 5, 1 to 5. Those are boring. You can ask open-ended survey questions, or you can ask closed-ended survey questions. Within closed-ended, the questions could be ordinal, questions could be nominal. I'll show you examples. This is an example of an open-ended question, a question where I have to write down the response. There is no predetermined category. What is the most important problem teachers are facing today? The second one is also an open-ended question with a smaller box. Your box indicates to the participant how much information you are looking for. So if you need more information, give a larger size box. Specify the kind of answers you need. In an average week, how often do you cook dinner at home? You have to specify, what do you mean? Personally cook dinner at home, or a cook comes and cooks dinner for you? Or what businesses would you like to see in Ahmedabad? Open-ended question. How many am I supposed to write? So what 3 businesses would you like to see in Ahmedabad? Specifying, making it more specific. Avoid making people calculate sums. So there are questions where you have to, in a 40-hour work week, what all do you do? Research 20% of the time, teaching 90% of the time, this. You can do this in online surveys where the sums will be calculated automatically. Do not make your respondents do any kind of calculation. Provide extra motivation to respond. So if you must absolutely have an open-ended question, don't ask it too often. Only have 1 or 2 or maybe at most 3. And also say that the question is very important for understanding something. Please take your time in answering it. That one cue tells you that this is very important for the person. So, okay, if I can answer it, I should take my time. Write it down very specifically. Now, closed-ended questions, nominal questions are those that do not have a natural order. So what city do I live in? What state do I live in? Ahmedabad or Gujarat. It does not have a natural order to it. Like I said already, you could think of making it alphabetical so that it's quick for me to choose it. Ordinal scales are those that form the bulk of survey questions. They have scales. There's an ordered set of categories. Now we assume that each category is equidistant from the other category conceptually. In the first slide that I showed you, how excited are you? Choosing 4 doesn't mean you are only 80% excited. Choosing 3 does not mean you are 60% excited. But we tend to assume that there's equal distance between each category. So this is an example of an ordinal question. And then there are partially closed-ended questions, some closed-ended responses with some open-ended responses like this. Okay, when you ask closed-ended questions, state both the sides. Otherwise, it looks biased. So don't ask, do you favor children taking cell phones to school? Say, do you favor or oppose taking children taking phones to school? Because your question is asking favor and your answer is saying favor and oppose. Similarly, how satisfied are you with the overall service? But your answer choices have dissatisfied. If your answer choices have dissatisfied, then your question should also include how satisfied or dissatisfied to make it more balanced and less biased. Similarly, how concerned are you that you will get a computer virus? Maybe you're not at all concerned, which is the 5th option. So how concerned, if at all, are you that you will get a computer virus? Include all possible choices. So look at this example. From which of these sources did you first learn about the results of the election? Radio, television, someone at work, while at home, while traveling to work. The last 2 options do not tell you the source. The last 2 options tell you where you were. A better way to write it is radio, television, internet, newspaper, another person, which were not included. And also, where were you when you first heard about it? That is where you write at work, at home, or traveling to work. Don't mingle up answer choices of different questions together. Okay, what is your age? What if I'm 40 years or maybe I'm 35 years old? What do I choose? Number 3 or number 4? I don't know. Your category should always be mutually exclusive. So 30 to 34, 35 to 39, and not 35 to 40. Similarly, what are some of the basic components of a balanced meal? You have carbohydrates, proteins, fatty acids, minerals, glucose. Glucose is also a form of carbohydrate. Short chain amino acids is also a protein. So these categories are not mutually exclusive. Avoid bias. Which of the following do you feel is most responsible for the recent outbreaks of bullying in schools? It looks like you've already made up your mind that parents are irresponsible, teachers are lenient. Just say parents, schools, televisions, and teachers. Do not bias by writing irresponsible parents or lenient teacher behavior. Okay, you need to think about where is your 0. And this is where we talk about a unipolar scale and a bipolar scale. It's evident from the name that a unipolar scale has how many zeros? 1 0 at the corner, and then the scale moves in a certain direction. A bipolar scale has its 0 at the center, and it moves in a positive direction and a negative direction. Okay. If you look at the first example, completely successful, very successful, somewhat successful, slightly successful, not at all successful. Not at all is your 0. So this is a unipolar scale. Here, the middle option is neither likely nor unlikely, neither here nor there. So it's a 0. This is an example of a bipolar scale. Now, sometimes your 0 could be in 2 different places. A 0 could be not important at all, but a 0 could also be between somewhat important and somewhat unimportant. A 0 could be between +1 and -1, right? Let's say somewhat important is +1. Somewhat unimportant is -1. What comes in between is 0. So sometimes it is not clear about where exactly is your 0. This could cause problems in analyzing your data. Okay. Also, if you say you are somewhat successful or somewhat satisfied, it also means you are somewhat dissatisfied. A glass is half full, half empty, right? So then it's not so clear if you should choose somewhat satisfied or somewhat dissatisfied. Again, it depends on your question. The other thing is bipolar scales not only measure the direction, but also the intensity. What do I mean by that? Bipolar scale is measuring the direction, which is whether it will go in a likely direction or it will go in an unlikely direction. But it's also measuring the intensity. Within likely, it could be very or somewhat or slightly. That is the intensity. A unipolar scale would not be able to do that because you are only looking at one particular direction. Typically, a bipolar scale will have 5 to 7 options, but I would really say don't go more than 5. It's too much to process. Also, use natural metrics whenever you can. So how often do you go grocery shopping? Regularly, sometimes, not at all. Regularly to you means something different compared to regularly for me. And now you're leaving it to me to guess. What did you mean when you wrote regularly? Right? So instead of that, ask for a number. Now, the problem with number is different people will calculate their numbers differently. If you ask me how many times have you gone grocery shopping in the last year, I will say, okay, 1 year, 52 weeks. I go every Sunday. So maybe 52 times. But there are certain weeks when I was traveling, so I did not go, and certain weeks when I had to go multiple times because I forgot something. So maybe 60 times. Or maybe I save all my transaction list, all my bills, and I can count them. So different people will answer the same question differently depending on how they're doing the math in the head. And the problem is when each person estimates the frequency in a different way, that would lead to measurement error. A good way of avoiding it is ask how many times in the last month and not necessarily last year. Okay, make sure that you give a balanced scale. A balanced scale is where your conceptual 0 is at the center. In the first case, excellent, very good, and good, all 3 are positive attributes. Fair and poor are negative attributes. So now this is not a balanced scale. 3 good and 2 not good. Instead of writing that, fair should be in between. It means neither good nor bad. Similarly, increase it, keep it the same, decrease, decrease, decrease. So this becomes the 0, the second option, not balanced. Keep it the same should be the third option. Always have a balanced scale. We are approaching towards the end, so bear with me a little bit more. I wanted to show you something before we said goodbye. So verbally label all the cues. If you go back to the food outlet survey, don't even have 7 things. Ask only 5 options, and it could be strongly disagree, somewhat disagree, neither disagree nor agree, somewhat agree, and strongly agree. So your 0 becomes at the center. Ask one question at a time. So do you use your cell phone at least daily for voice calls, to access the internet, or to send text messages? You're asking me 3 different questions. Do not do it. First of all, ask me, do you have a cell phone? Only if I say yes, show me the arrow visually for voice call and internet and text message, whether the answer is yes or no. How many times did you eat together as a family last week? Number of meals? I don't know whether you're asking me if we went out or if it was at home. Specify where are you asking for, and how many meals did you sit down to eat at homes? Maybe we all have our food in different rooms. Am I going to count that? I do not know. So specify what are you exactly asking. This I've already told you, that personalize and avoid gender bias. So say dear 6th grade teacher and not dear sir and dear madam. Don't write incomplete or complex sentences. So instead of writing number of years lived in GJ, say how many years have you lived in Gujarat? Write down the full sentence with a question mark. Make it a question. Okay, very important. Make sure that your yes is a yes and a no is a no. No double negatives. So don't you like going to school? Don't you like not going to school? Don't ask that. Say, do you like going to school? Okay, question order effect. A survey is like a conversation that you have with anyone. What you talk at the beginning also influences what you talk later on. So if you've talked about how much struggle you are having at your current institution and how much you don't like it, you're more likely to say that, oh, my boss, I don't know, I don't get along with her so much. You won't say, oh, I have a wonderful manager and I'm having a great, because the two things just do not match. So similarly, treat your survey like a conversation where what people say in the beginning is going to influence how they respond towards the end. So if you ask, how many times do you like eating oily stuff? Do not ask the next question where what are your preferred food, because people will not choose certain options. That is called question ordering. You have to be mindful that certain answers in the beginning could influence the way people answer the later surveys. Okay, I will skip this part because this needs a little bit of explanation. This was about non-probability sampling. Maybe I'll just quickly tell you, surveys have many different uses. Survey itself could be a standalone thing where you collect some quantitative and qualitative data, but you can also use surveys when you are doing interviews, especially for very sensitive topics. The challenge of doing qualitative interviews is it takes time, it takes energy. You need people, you need to find people, and not everyone would be comfortable giving you an interview. If you ask, let's say I'm doing a study where I'm interviewing people about domestic violence. It's a very sensitive topic. I can float a short survey at the beginning where they answer certain demographic questions, who they are, what's their age group, so that I'm not starting my interview asking, how old are you? Which is a sensitive question. I already have that information in the survey. Also, ask maybe one open-ended question. Can you give an example of when you experienced domestic violence? Number one, you are capturing sensitive information without making the person uncomfortable. And number two, if the person says that I have not experienced domestic violence, then you don't even interview that person because they are not eligible to participate in your study. It also acts as a good icebreaker when you don't know the person, that, okay, so I read this is what you were talking about in your survey. Would you be comfortable expanding it a little bit more? So that becomes like an icebreaker question. And also ask them in the survey, would you like to participate in a future interview study? If they say yes, contact them. If they say no, then don't contact them. So you can do an initial screening. People who say that I have never experienced, they can be removed from the list. You can develop probing questions or icebreaker questions. And also sometimes in open-ended survey questions, people will tell you things that you had not thought about. So maybe you had not thought about same-sex domestic violence. You assume that domestic violence happens between a man and a woman. But maybe in that survey, someone talked about same-sex domestic violence. Now you can include that in your interview question. So surveys have many different uses. General tips. And we are kind of over time, but just give me maybe 7 more minutes. I need you to think about who you are with respect to the work you do. Often, without any awareness, we act like data extractors or data miners. We profit out of the data we collect from other people. How do we profit? Not always monetarily, but yes, monetarily, we get our jobs, we get our promotion, we get our PhDs from the data that we have collected from others. You need to think about how do you give back to the people who have given you data. So if you have done school surveys and you found something, go back to the schools and tell the principal and tell the teachers how they can improve their school or what they are already doing good. If you have collected data from certain communities, go back to them and have conversations about what you found. This is one important step that we forget, which is what behaving like a colonizer means, that we take data which comes at a cost to people. Cost could be time, energy, anything, and we never go back and reconnect with them. Do not do that. A simple example is if you had to go and ask your neighbor for a bowl of sugar, you just don't go if you don't know them. You spend time establishing relationship with them. So you should know who your respondents are. And even before you have given out your survey, you should spend some time knowing your respondents, spending time and knowing who the community is. Okay. Keep a long window for data collection. For me, I typically, depending on the study, I have between 1 to 1.5 years of data collection so that people have more time to participate. And of course, in the day of social media, conferences and blogs, you can talk about your study and create that general interest so that your participants would know what are you doing out of that study. Now, there are so many tips for Sarvesh Datta. I will not go through all of them. But what I think he could have done is, instead of floating a survey first, he should do a few pilot interviews and he should talk to the people. He could also, some of the questions he was asking, what is it, 5 things you like, 5 things you don't like. You look at the bills, you look at what are people buying. People only buy things that they like. So also use those kind of records to come up with some idea about what is going on. Spend some time at these food joints observing, see if people are complaining, people are not getting their food on time. So also spend some time interviewing, observing before you do the actual survey. And then, of course, there are these bunch of things that he could be improving upon. Okay, so a summary, what we have learned so far, we have learned that we need to decrease cost, increase benefit, and improve trust for our participants, not for us, for our participants. We have learned about probability and non-probability sampling and when do you use which. We have learned about the 4 kinds of errors. All surveys have errors. The idea is to minimize it. Don't log out yet because I have something that I want to share with you. I want to give you. Okay. We have learned that visual layout is important. We've learned about open and closed-ended question, conceptual midpoint, visual midpoint, unipolar scales, bipolar scales, question order effect, and we talked a little bit about decolonizing data collection. We need to think about decolonizing the process. We won't revisit the food outlet. We've already spent enough time talking about it. I'll share with you a 50-point checklist that I'll show you in a minute. If you want to give back, if you think you've learned something useful today, whenever you see a poorly done survey, please take a screenshot and email it to me. I have a growing collection of these surveys. I use them to teach my class, to improve my class, to improve my lectures. So they will really help me. And I would not end this conversation without thanking Professor Don Dillman. He's the author of this book, along with the others. This is a very good book. If you want to know more about the social science of surveys, you should absolutely invest in this book. Either get it from your library or online or purchase a copy. The examples are all American because he's an American author. I wish there was a book written in the Indian context, but in the absence of that, Don Dillman's book is a very good book where I have learned a lot. If you would like to reach out to me, this is my email ID. I'm also on Twitter, so feel free to connect with me. And before I open it up for questions, I'll stop screen sharing and I will share a document with you. I hope I can share a document. Yeah. Reshmi, can I share a document?
Sure, ma'am. We can share.
I'm trying to figure out. Yes, I see that now. Desktop. This is a 50-point checklist that I've shared on chat, and I'll go back and share my screen once again. I will not go through the checklist because you already have it, but these are the different things that I have spoken about today. I love giving out those checklists. People who have taken my classes before in other topics also know that I have checklists on other topics like CV writing, CV building, academic visibility. These are the 50 things that you should, and there are more, of course, but there are these things that you should absolutely make sure you read, you check off before you send out a survey or you develop a survey. This kind of gives you, are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? So I hope this one is going to be helpful for you. I won't spend time reading out the questions, but really the last question is very important. Can you create a shorter survey? If you can, then don't ask longer questions. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you all so much for your time. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have. I'm sorry I could not read all your chats because there's only one screen, but feel free to ask me a question that is more generic and useful to everyone rather than something that's very specific to you. And you're very welcome to email me also later on and stay connected on Twitter.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, actually, when you were explaining about the bipolar and unipolar scale, were you trying to suggest that bipolar scales are much more useful than the unipolar scales?
No, I would not. And 1 second before I answer that, someone is asking for my email ID. So my email ID is devasmita.c@iima.ac.in. If you Google my name, you will find my IIMA webpage and my email ID is over there. You'll be able to find it easily. See, unipolar scale, bipolar scale, I would not say that one is better than the other, but it depends on what you're trying to measure. If you are measuring satisfaction and you don't care about dissatisfaction, then go for a unipolar scale because it gives you more breadth to ask. You now have 4 or 5 anchors to only ask about satisfaction without focusing on dissatisfaction. If you want to ask what you liked about this presentation, and I don't want you to talk about what you did not like, then I would give you a unipolar scale. But if I want both the views, what did you like and what did you not like, then I will give you a bipolar scale, knowing that I will get your direction and intensity, but the resolution factor becomes smaller because now I'm only spending 2.5 points on how good it was and 2.5 points on how bad it was. So it all depends on your question. If someone could please post the checklist, because someone is asking for the checklist, so one of you can just share the checklist again.
Now, could you please repeat the name of the book just now you mentioned?
Yeah, the name of the book is this: Internet, Phone, Mail, and Mixed Mode Surveys, the Tailored Design Method by Don Dillman. If you email me, I'm happy to share the slides as well as a picture of this book. There are many other good books, but this is the one that I have used since 2016 to understand surveys more. Sample size.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sorry, I see a question about sample size. Sample size in itself can be a 2-hour conversation. See, this is a 25-hour class that I teach for the PhDs. I have condensed it into 2 hours. But one thing I'll tell you, if you want to know what should be a good sample size for probability sampling, number 1, consult a statistician. And number 2, Google sample size calculator. Sample size calculator. You'll get different websites that will help you calculate your sample size depending on how much margin of error you are willing to accept. In particular, if you go to Rayosoft, that is the one that I'm most familiar with, Rayosoft, R-A-O-S-O-F-T, and you put in your population size, you put in how much margin of error are you willing to deal with, and it will give you a proper sample size. But don't depend just on that. You go and see a proper statistician if you want a probability sampling survey. If you want to do a convenience survey, then you get what you get. I mean, you don't have to think so much about the sample size, but your findings will not be generalizable.
Hello.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. It's a fantastic talk. I never realized that in the last 2 hours you will pack up so much, and we will get to understand so much. But just one doubt. I was wondering whether we should have any thoughts on the behavior of the respondents, because we are taking information from him or her. Should we judge the basis on that? I'm just not sure how we should react on that.
So can you give an example? Survey taking behavior or general behavior?
General behavior, because we are taking the information and our studies will be based on the responses of the person. So should we allow that person to share his or her heart, or we should ask him or her to be specific? Or because I believe in one dialogue or conversation, it's tough for a person to open the heart. That's what I believe. I'm not sure whether I'm right or wrong. So if you could share your thoughts, I would be grateful.
So an example would help, but are you talking of surveying for a sensitive topic?
No. For instance, I'm going to write on Indian media, so I won't be asking questions on a sensitive topic. I would be asking general questions.
So what do you mean by behavior of the participant?
So if for instance, say means political affiliations of that sort. So if I'm asking a person who will support the government, and if the questions are about the government, the performance, then the person may be agitated or may not like to respond.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, so one thing you can ensure is you don't include bias in your questioning.
Obviously, obviously. So I will go for an open-ended means questions.
Yeah.
And hopefully can derive the outcome based on that. So sorry. I believe everybody would be bothering. I will write an email to you in a way so that we can talk on.
Please do that, because an example will really help me understand how exactly.
I will think about it, and then I will share an email to you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Good evening. It was a wonderful session. Ma'am, I have already sent you a mail requesting for the PPT.
Okay.
Along with that, I need one more thing, the wrong questionnaire that you had shown, like the survey form, to refer, like exactly what all things may go wrong. Please share even that.
Yeah, I'll share it right now. But remember, I made it up so much based on the surveys that I see.
That was a wonderful one to understand that how things may go wrong.
So I have just made it up, but I have made it up not in vacuum. This is based on all the questions surveys that I see. I've just shared it here, and if you still haven't received it, I'm happy to email it to you as well.
Okay, that'll be wonderful. Thank you.
And I exaggerated. I wanted to make it a little more dramatic, which is why I have done it the way I have. But I hope that makes my point clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a wonderful session, and I'm just hoping that we can be connected to work on certain projects which can really help humanity.
Sorry, I can't hear you loudly.
No, I just was saying that I'm very grateful and thank you for this wonderful session. It's quite helpful, and I'm looking forward to maybe collaborating, working with you and other like-minded people in helping us to create a much better, peaceful world. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much. Just remember one quick thing for all of you. Surveys are not as easy as you think. It's a social exchange. It's a social interaction. So I've spent the question that I posed, who are you in response to the work you do? I've spent years reading this book and reading more books and teaching a course on survey development and using surveys in my research. And I'm still learning. But remember that there are certain things we do unconsciously, subconsciously, we do not realize. It is a social exchange. Would you just knock on someone's door and ask for mangoes or ask for a bowl of sugar? No, you spend time creating a relationship with them, and them as in not them always in person with your, not knowing everyone in your institute, but in general, people at my institute know that I do surveys, I do it regularly, and I talk to people about how they think about the surveys. So you always develop a relationship even before you have given them a survey. And once you have findings, you always go back to the community and say what can be done, what can be bettered, or what is it they're already doing good, because that completes the cycle. Otherwise, you're just becoming a data thief. You're stealing, not stealing, I wouldn't put it to that extent, but you're taking people's time and not giving back. So that loop has to be closed. You have to go back and give back to the community.
I would just like to say that thanks for that end part that you said, right? You're creating a lot of awareness of giving back from the research so that, we create a better world. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Absolutely. And this was a lot packed in 2 hours. Typically, I'll do in-class workshops that are maybe 2 hours long, where I'll only talk of one section that I have talked about. And a lot of his answers, I was telling you, oh, this is bad, but I don't do it in in-person workshops. I actually give you a copy of the survey and let you figure out what is not right. That's a much better way. But okay, in the absence of that, I hope that this quick monologue was also helpful.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, of course.
Yeah.
Good evening, ma'am. Rohit here.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask a small question, like if I am going for a study, whether pilot test of questionnaire would lead me to improvement of the further questionnaire?
Absolutely. And you should pilot test it with multiple kinds of people. Pilot test it with the participants themselves. You don't use that data, but you improve it. Then you pilot test it with the content experts, people who are experts in the field. Then you also use something called a think aloud protocol. So you've given me a survey and I am thinking aloud. I am reading it aloud and I'm saying, how many times in the last week have I gone grocery shopping? Let me think. How many times have I gone? No, maybe I haven't. So I'm thinking aloud. And you sit there and you observe me and you see how am I thinking. So think aloud protocol is also very important to see how people actually think. But yeah, to answer your question, absolutely pilot test.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ma'am, it was great session. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you and good to see you again.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
This is Ramini.
Hi, Ramini.
From
Good
the
to see you
MBA
too.
program. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Good to see you and good to, see, your presentation was as usual nice.
Thank you.
I had one doubt actually. So when we use a standardized scale for, measurement, we have lots of questions sometimes in those scales, maybe up to 50. So how do we encourage participants or respondents to fill up that questionnaire? That's a very long questionnaire.
Yeah.
So I was in dilemma. So how to go about it? How to encourage them or how to convince them to fill it up completely? Because most of the participants, they'll leave it in between and they might, close it or they may not complete it at all.
Yeah. So the first thing I want you to think about is, do you even need to send them the entire scale? You should, ideally, but consult a content expert, a scale development expert, because there are a lot of scales that are developed in a certain context, in a certain country, in a certain place, but maybe not entirely applicable to who you want to study. I'm not saying that choose your scale questions, but sometimes I've seen many papers, I've read many papers where they only use a part of the scale just because the other questions were not applicable to the group that they were questioning. The second thing you should do is, if you must ask or send a long scale, write it down that this question will take you so much time, but please, it's very important for you to fill it as well as you can for us to understand. So make that conversation with them on your survey and tell them that this is going to cost their time. Don't be covert about it. Don't say a survey will take you 10 minutes where a survey will take you 60 minutes. And develop that relationship. Tell them, be upfront about it. And then you hope that people will fill it. But if they don't, then you can't hold it against them. But
So
see if you even need such a long scale.
Okay, ma'am. So one more thing, if I'm choosing few questions from the scale, then do I need to mention that in my paper as well?
Absolutely. You need to mention all the methodological decisions you took, and choosing a few items, you don't do it randomly. You always consult an expert, a statistician or a content expert who tells you. But yeah, you have to be honest about it.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for the
Hello,
presentation.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. I'm audible.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I have one question that we are collecting data from humans through questionnaire. So, is there
Loudly.
Hello, hello. Now audible?
I can hear you, but I can barely make out your words. So loudly.
Yeah, my question is about we are collecting a data from humans through questionnaire. So, is there any importance of ethical committee's approval to use on that data?
Committee approval? You mean IRP?
Ethical committee approval. Is there any requirement for this?
What committee approval? Maybe you can write it down.
Ma'am, hello.
Yeah, what committee? I'm missing that word.
Ethical committee.
Oh, ethical committee. Absolutely, you should. And especially if you're thinking of publishing your paper, any good journal will ask you for IRB approval. If you haven't done it, you should do it. If your university doesn't do it, I don't know how to work around it, but you should get approval. Someone also asked about the recording. I think the recording will be put on YouTube in a few days. I think so. And I can share the presentation, not now, because I'd like to work on it a little bit. But I hope that answers your question. You should, if possible, you should.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hi, ma'am. Good evening.
Yeah, hi.
How are you doing?
Good, good. Tell me.
Ma'am, just a quick question. You just said that if not required, we should just use a part of a particular questionnaire for collecting data or for the survey,
part of a scale.
For the scale. Ma'am, would that not actually question on the reliability and the validity of the scale itself?
It will, and that is why you consult an expert. And this you do not do all the time. But there are certain instances where really the entire scale doesn't apply to the population, the sample that you are studying. Maybe a scale in my field, the impostor phenomenon scale was developed in a very different context in the US for, based on what white women said. A lot of people in India haven't even heard of the term imposter syndrome. So I cannot use that same scale for a sample that does not understand the term, that does not know what that term means. And those the items will not reflect their life experiences. Because see, these are two different societies. The US is a very individualistic society. Ours is a very collective identity society. So if I'm taking certain individual-centric scales and applying it to a collective identity society, a lot of the things would not apply. My point being that you need to make certain decisions.
Right. Ma'am, and another question in connection with the same. Does it make sense? Like many a times it happens, the person is not very comfortable with the language that the questionnaire is being made for. Do you think it makes sense when we are actually changing the language for the same?
In the scale?
Yeah.
Can you give an example?
Like, for example, if the scale is in English, and maybe the person from whom I'm collecting the data, they are not very comfortable with the English language. So can I actually use the regional language for their convenience?
So the thing is, it's not so easy. You have to translate that scale and back translate it back to English and see that it makes sense. There's a process to it. You just can't translate it and give it to someone and then say that the results are valid. There are complications. The one thing you can do is develop a new scale, but I know it's not always possible.
Yeah.
Again, it's a question for a statistician or a content expert to tell you. But if you look up on the internet, there are procedures for translating a scale and then again back translating. So right now I was working on translating the imposter phenomenon scale in Bangla. I needed 3 experts to translate in Bangla and then again back translate it in English and see if the 2 English, they are the same or not. Someone has shared a book. I would encourage you not to do that because that's not legal. I would encourage you not to share things that you should not be downloading here. All right. Okay. So,
Ma'am, I am having one last question about the questionnaires validity test and reliability test.
Yeah, reliability and validity are for scales. For surveys, you improve them by pilot testing your instruments. But really, the concepts reliability and validity apply to scales.
Okay. Means the questions in that, what scale we have considered about that? Reliability and validity?
No, for a survey, that is why you pilot test. You make different people take your survey, including content experts. Content experts will go through it and see if the language is the same as what you're trying to ask.
Okay, so through pilot survey, we can do that validity and reliability test.
I mean, I won't call it validity, but looking at how, yeah, I won't call it validity.
So
Ma'am, can I ask the? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, means in the publication, a reviewer asked this question like how to validate your questionnaire. That's why I asked question this.
Yeah, see, validate could mean different thing. You also validate a metro ticket by, it doesn't mean the same validity word that we use for a scale. We do not. You show it to different content matter experts. You make different people take your survey. You pilot test it and you see how it goes. You can also do, so maybe, you know, online surveys, there are many portals that show you the amount of time people have spent answering a survey. And if that time is like 1 minute versus 25 minutes versus 10 minutes, you should be suspicious of the ones who only took 1 minute, which means they haven't read the questions. So you should discard those responses. You might see that many people are terminating the survey after a particular question. They are terminating it after question 11. So look at what question 11 is asking that's making people close the survey, or what question 12 is asking that they are not even going to question 12. So those are the things that you do as you float your survey. You modify your survey.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
All right.
Ma'am, is there any book that gives us a template of all the surveys? I mean, some kind of template kind of thing, examples.
A template of what?
I mean, survey questions. I mean, how the questionnaire should look? What are the things that should be there?
So
for
this
any
book talks a lot about
examples?
it. See, this book that I showed you talks a lot about it, but it's all in the US context. Really, what I showed you is all based on years of experience of me looking at poorly designed surveys. So if I have to name a book, I mean, my brain is the book that I just showed you. And you can develop a similar knack by looking at different surveys over the years, looking at them critically and connecting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, there's no one book that I have got all this information from. I've mostly followed this book, but it's also based on my experience of looking at surveys.
So much. Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, you all should go home and have a cup of tea and relax. It's evening. Purnadi, it's so good to see you.
I just wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Nowadays in social sciences, we talk a lot about the mixed methodology.
Yes.
And another method of focus group discussion. So
yeah.
How do you perceive both these?
Oh, that's like a big discussion. And see, surveys can also be used for mixed methods. Maybe I'll recommend a few books, and I've also given a talk on mixed methods, but it's true. What the second example I show you about how your interviews can be enhanced by asking surveys and taking certain data from those surveys, that is an example of a mixed method design where you're mixing surveys and interviews to answer your research question. But I can give you a lot of information. I just don't know what I can give you now.
Because for us, what happens in law, we often analyze a lot of judgment to look at the judicial trend. Yeah. Now, what happens sometimes if it is a contemporary topic, we do not have enough material.
Yeah.
There, we might do a mixed method and going to, those who are in the judiciary may give us that how from there. So there, a mixed methodology idea can be.
Your question is how to design a mixed method?
No. Then, how good is it? Is it a good methodology to adopt?
Yes, absolutely. A well-done mixed method study is much more powerful than only a one method study, because now you're using different methods to look at the same question. However, not all people know how to do mixed methods.
Yes, because we got very, I would say a little strict comments from the reviewer suggesting that how do you justify the methodology?
I'll email you a bunch of resources, but let me answer your question quickly. A lot of people, they get comments from reviewers because what they think is mixed method is multi-method. They have used this, and this, 3 methods, but they have not mixed anything. You have to explicitly show where has the mixing happened. The mixing can happen at the data collection level. The mixing can happen at the data analysis level, data interpretation level, but you have to explicitly show for a mixed method study where exactly did the mixing happen. So it's possible that you surveyed a group of people and interviewed a subset of them. You have to talk about where did the mixing happen? What did you learn in the survey that made you design your interview in a particular way? But we can talk about it
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, Reshmi?
Yes, ma'am.
Can we stop recording and can we call it a day?
Yeah. Sure.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.